How can we target the nervous system to help clients reverse out of toxic narcissistic patterns? That's the question we'll dive into in this module. First, we'll look at what narcissistic thoughts and behaviors might indicate about what's going on in your client's nervous system. Then we'll look at a powerful metaphor that can help your client begin to shift the nervous system response that sometimes only fan the flames of narcissism. After that, we'll look at some practical neural exercises that can help clients become more attuned to their nervous system. We'll also look at how to foster a sense of safety in the nervous system of a client who's inclined toward narcissism. And to close out the module, you'll hear a case study that can help you incorporate all these elements into your work. So to start us off, Dr. Stephen Porges walks through what typically is going on in the nervous system of a client who presents with narcissism.
Grandiosity and narcissism are really indicators of an individual who is not co-regulating with another. And the issue with a lot of this is often that people say, they actually interpret that as saying, I'm not good enough. They're actually buying into the grandiosity and the narcissism, and they want to convince that person that they are, quote, worthy. And they're not truly understanding what's going on. What's going on is that these are strategies for survival for an individual who is basically extraordinarily vulnerable to interacting with another, becoming accessible. Let's say they feel under threat by others, or they feel under threat that others will know their core. So it's like they have something they have to protect others from. It does not necessarily mean inferior. It means that they are not comfortable with co-regulating.
According to Stephen, a narcissistically inclined nervous system is often in a state of threat. And as we know, that state prevents clients from co-regulating with others. Beyond that, it can also cut clients off from one of our biological imperatives as humans.
Our goal in life is to be safe in the arms of another, to trust another, to share, and have someone watch their back, and not really think that if someone is in your back, they're going to hurt you. And that's some of the narcissists and the grandiosity keep people away from the inner core, the inner sanctum of their own self. So they're never sharing who they are, and they're never giving, or they're never expressing any form of benevolence. There's kind of an interesting thing, the other set of metaphors that I play with, and that is, are you a good guest, and can you be a good host? So the issue is often for people, they can be wonderful hosts, but they have great difficulty being a good guest. And because they can't change and reflect in these two different roles. So to me, again, part of maturity in life is understanding the reciprocity of being a good guest. That if you're a good guest, the other person, you're not taking from someone. So when you're a good host, you want to make sure that you're generous and someone doesn't feel, they feel good. But when you're a good guest, you're making others feel good in giving. It's really a remarkable experience. And I don't think we spend much time in our developmental phases talking about being good guests and good hosts.
It strikes me that Stephen's metaphor might be another useful way of helping your clients practice the perspective taking that Dr. Russell Coltz talked about in the last module. Not only that, it can also help your client gain a clear understanding of how their nervous system reacts to and interacts with others when it's under a state of threat.
These are features of an autonomic nervous system that's retuned and locked in a state of threat. And locked in a state of threat blocks the ability to co-regulate, blocks the ability to be compassionate, blocks the ability to be benevolent, to be that good host and that good guest. So you can't role reverse. You may have aspects of empathy, but not in the positive way. You may feel other people's pain, and that may be disruptive to you. But if you're at the level of a physiological state of calmness, that other person's pain is witnessed and supported by your presence and not evaluated by your presence.
Now that we've seen how narcissism typically plays out in the nervous system, how can we work with it? Specifically, how might we help clients begin to successfully co-regulate with others? Well, according to Stephen, an important first step is helping your client recognize when their nervous system is entering a state of threat.
The story goes back to a more primary one, that is this whole aspect of being embodied. Can they shift physiological states and report that? Can they feel the changes in their body, or are they already numb to their bodily experiences? So we can start talking about neural exercises. I think in the world of yoga and breathing therapies, you're already there because people are, in a sense, moving people into different physiological states through the potency of breathing. If you look at people who have become polyvagal informed in their therapy models, they don't talk about the events. They talk about the feelings. So they have people move. And I'm talking about Deb Dana's work, where she has them move up and down a metaphoric ladder of shifting physiological states. And these are neural exercises of embodiment, of experiencing and accepting and understanding the repertoire of the feelings. And then when they occur spontaneously, you know what they are.
So let's look at some practical neural exercises that can help clients self-regulate and become more attuned to the state of their nervous system.
We know more and more about what the breath can do in terms of self-regulation. And we know that, right, when we regulate our breath, we're regulating our body, we're regulating our brain, and that means we're regulating our impulses and our emotions and our defenses and, right, all kinds of other things that we want our clients to be able to do to feel safe in therapy, let their guard down in terms of those narcissistic defenses in particular. So when I talk to narcissists, I often think it's useful to kind of like, I'm going to let you in on a secret here, right? We're going to do some breathing. And I like to talk about your breath as like a remote control, right? It can start to, help you tune in to optimize, to be the best you can in therapy or be the best you can at work or in these other aspects of life. And let's maybe just, start the session to get ourselves into that mode in our nervous systems with like 7-11 breath. Right? Super simple, just breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Getting it into that like 5 or 6 breaths a minute range with a few of those. Watch the nervous system quiet down, right? Our nervous system too, because we can be a little on edge sometimes with some of these clients. And that can really help. And then both of us, right, in terms of our defenses. And then we can also track with the breath, when my client does have their guard down, what is the ratio? What's about their breath rate? How can I get them back to that physiological state? If I can actually track their breath rate, I can help them physiologically get back to that state where their defenses are a little bit down and they're maybe a bit more open to the challenging feedback that we may need to give those challenging narcissists. And of course, movement, we know it's incredibly symbolic about, right, just getting ourselves unstuck, right? We also know that our posture, right, impacts our mood, impacts our defenses, shifts what's happening in our nervous system, which of course Stephen would tell us a lot about, and even more just around engagement and disengagement in terms of what's happening in the interplay between the therapist and the client. And I know that there's so much that we can say about yoga, but I want to actually go further and in fact, kind of more accessible and more simple, which is just walking with clients. I think there's so much going on in that kind of walking and side-by-side behavior, particularly with the narcissist. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but we do know that there's certain kinds of narcissism that tend to be more male in nature. And I think that these kinds of side-by-side therapeutic activities and ways of engaging can just really start to help folks let their guard down. When I work a lot with families and dads and sons, I often say, do stuff side by side. Don't sit across from each other, right? Like, fishing, right? Doing repairs around the house, these side by side activities, walking, driving in the car, right? They're kind of have this regulation built into them, right? Conversation's getting a little too hot. Like, let's press the button and wait for the light to cross the street or something like that. And I think this works in therapy too. the side-by-side thing, because there's not that threatening eye contact in some ways that brings the defenses up in particularly in narcissists. So I think also what we do is the guard gets let down a little bit without the eye contact, and folks just open up a little bit more, talk a little bit more. The other thing that happens is that our walk, our gait, our bodies end up co-regulating in this different way. Who's leading, who's following, who's walking a bit faster, right? These are messages that are useful to us as the clinician. We can also co-regulate them by shifting our posture, shifting our speed, these kinds of things that can also really unconsciously impact our clients and help them let go a little bit of their defenses as well. And we can also watch their body language. How are they walking, right? Aggressively, not so aggressively, openly, not so openly, confidently, not so confidently, right? We can mirror, we can help them shift stances, and again, kind of co-regulate to help them open up a little bit. So I think that just movement, even just walking, can be so useful in that way.
Dr. Stephen Porges and Chris Willard just shared several practical physical exercises you might use to help your client begin to first recognize when they're in a threat state, and second, start to regulate their nervous system. So next, let's take it even a step further, because I want to get into some strategies you might use to foster a sense of safety in the nervous system, especially with the client who might be narcissistically inclined.
And so how do we help the narcissist to start to feel a little bit safer? Oftentimes I try to frame it with the narcissist in terms of like, yes, you're great, all of that, right? There's still this room for improvement. Like the Kaizen philosophy of just kind of always this continuous partial improvement that people can bring to their lives. It's not that you're bad, but here's how you can do even better. And so thinking about how we then deliver feedback becomes a real challenge. And I often think about what is it? In some ways, it's very simple. It's like, I remember when I was in college, right? The kind of compliment sandwich for an art crit or a creative writing crit or something like that. It's like, first you give a compliment, then you maybe give the feedback, then you kind of patch them back up with a compliment and a model for how to move forward. And, and there's actually science to this, that as we allow people to get comfortable with a nice compliment and flattery, right, then they're more able to then see, oh, okay, here is where I can make an improvement. And maybe here's the model of improvement, this person that I do look up to, right, in my field or in whatever it is that I admire. And here's how they've done some improvement. So you give them also that model, right? And then the nice pat on the back afterwards. I actually think about writing an article that's like the science of the shit sandwich, almost, in terms of how we, our nervous systems can help us become more comfortable, and we can set other people at ease, sort of basically through that strategy.
So to help tie together a lot of what we've looked at within this module, I want to get into a case study. In it, you'll hear from Dr. Usha Tamalanara and how she used a parallel version of Dr. Stephen Porges' earlier metaphor. Take a listen.
This is a client who's in his 30s, and he has been dating for a number of years. He had a long-term relationship, and then since that point, like straight out of college, and then after that, his relationships with women have typically lasted just a few months, and he's convinced that he has just not met the right woman. And he fantasizes that if she just has the right qualities that would be interesting enough to him, then he would stay committed to that person. He often thinks about other women, however, while he's dating any one person. So he looks at other women and wishes that he could maybe be with them. Should he go up and talk to them? So this becomes a significant distraction for him and a preoccupation. So for a while in our work together, we focused on his frustration. I would say this is the early part of our work. We focused on his frustration of not meeting this right person that he fantasized about. But eventually I asked him, is it them, or could it be something about where you are in your life right now, or something about you that is leading you to feel this way? And I think asking that particular question, in retrospect, I really think it parallels this question, are you a good host and are you a good guest? My client didn't appreciate this question at first. He was annoyed with me, and because he wanted to focus on the other person. Why is this person not what he wishes for, what he hopes for? But as we talked more, he became, I would say, gradually more willing to bear the idea that he wasn't ready to be with one person. And over time, we discovered that he may never want a monogamous relationship. And this has been a really difficult thing for him to come to terms with, because that's not what he imagined about himself. That's not how he constructs himself. And it's hard to come to terms with how unconsciously he, at least in part, didn't want a monogamous relationship. Is it okay to not want that? And this would be a question that came up in sort of this next phase of our working together. I do think that my client came to better connect with this part of himself that wasn't known to himself, and how he has not empathized with his partners once he made time for reflection, and actually when he engaged in more physical activity and exercise. He started to feel more connected to his body and these conflicted feelings that he was having. And so these conversations and paying attention to a more reflective space, or creating a more reflective space, I believe really helped us in working on what it's like for him and the person he is dating to be in limbo about what's happening in a relationship. So it's been important for him to recognize his own feelings and to honor them, and to recognize his partner's feelings, and start to try to communicate more honestly about what he really wants.
So whether you phrase it as Stephen did, or put a slight twist on it to better suit your client's needs like Usha did, the metaphor of being a good guest and a good host can be useful, especially as an exercise in perspective taking with clients who struggle with narcissism. Now, in the next module, we'll take a look at how you might identify and begin to work with narcissistic abuse. I'll see you in Module 6.